So Schiller Aftermath team, just so you know, like 200 people registered. So we're not sure how many people will be watching us, but this is good. This is really good for our messaging.
Hi, everyone. We'll just get started in just a minute. Let's letting everyone filter in. Like we have 60 people so far. It's excellent. And just while people are filtering in, I'm Erin Driscoll. I'm the Adult Services Librarian at the Wilmington Memorial Library. I also want to thank our partnering libraries for helping us get the word out about this event. And I'm so pleased to have Dr. Julia DeVoy with us tonight. She is an Associate Dean of Undergraduate Student Programs at Boston College's Carolyn A. and Peter S. Lynch School of Education and Human Development, and a principal investigator for the Aftermath Learning Lab, a research lab at Boston College, whose mission is to reduce textile waste through art, research, and education. Julia, do you want to introduce us to your team?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, everybody. First, we want to thank Erin and the Wilmington Public Library System and the other libraries that have been so generous with their time and inviting us this past year too. We're really grateful for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. And with that, I'll really tell you who's the brains behind the whole entire outfit is the team that's with me tonight. And I'll just sort of go across the screen as they appear to me. My first colleague is Kate Caniff, and she does a lot of work around policy. Kate, do you want to say anything else about yourself and your work at BC?
Yeah, I'm a senior here at BC in the Lynch School, and I got involved with the project in the fall of 2022 and have worked on a policy database that we'll talk about, and currently planning a conference related to the topic. So that's what I do on the team.
Yeah. Next over is my colleague Cecilia, who's been with me a couple of years. I think I stole her from another researcher, which probably isn't a good thing to admit, but she's been fantastic. Cecilia?
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I'm a senior at BC that major in computer science and applied psychology. I'm with team since summer 2022, and I'm now working on creating a board game related to textile waste with all our design thinking workshops.
Thanks. And my other colleague that's with us tonight is a grad student, and he's been with me this year. He's doing a lot with education. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Like Dean DeVoy said, I'm a grad student at BC, but I've known her a lot longer. I was there for undergrad too. And so I have, last semester, I joined the team and took a look at the website and was kind of editing our education-based modules. And now this semester, I'm moving a little bit to the policy side, doing some research there as well, but it's all been a lot of fun.
Great. All right, I think we're ready to go if you're ready.
Yeah, let me get the slides up.
Super. So first thing I want to do in terms of the slide presentation is not everybody could be here tonight, but I do want to acknowledge the rest of our group and our amazing set of colleagues. My dear friend and longtime colleague now, D.L. Lundberg, who's out in Seattle at the University of Washington, has been sort of with me since like 2012, I think, in this working, in this space and adjacent areas to this. My other colleague, fantastic artist who would love to be here tonight, but is in another state with a family situation, Mark Cooper, who is the sculptor. He's really the artistic creative mind behind the Aftermath sculpture. And another colleague of mine, good friend and computer science extraordinary buddy, Brian Smith, who's working more in the game side of things, and sort of helping us, like, how do we bring more of this into the digital space? And then my other colleague, Martin Scanley, who does a lot of work with social justice and education, who is based out in like Wisconsin right now. So we're all sort of living in this different space now post-pandemic. The other members of the research team that couldn't be here tonight are Evan Warnes, who is also a graduate student, but has been with me since the beginning of his undergraduate career at Boston College. So this is really the 5th year of my time getting to fortunately work with Evan. Another colleague of ours that has been with me since her freshman year, Addison Metzger, who's abroad this semester, and so because of the time change can't be with us right now. Kate, who you met, Jocelyn Liu, who joined us this semester and has done a lot of stuff with like our upcoming conference, which we'd invite you all to as well. It's a virtual conference, so you're most welcome to join us, and we'll share that information as well tonight. And Cecilia, who you met, who has been with me for a while and does a lot with the design thinking part of our project, and how do we expand all of what we'd like the learning takeaways into different spaces, different ways of engaging with this concept around textile and upcycling and green economy. And Griffin, who you met, who's a grad student, and Lourdes Muscapic, who I am not sure if she could make it tonight, but she's been with me this entire year, also a former undergrad. So you can see, like, what I do is I sort of bring them in as first year students, and then I hold them as long as I can. And Lourdes has been working with Cecilia on a lot of the design thinking pieces this year. So again, thank you to the team. I wouldn't be able to do this work without them, and they make this all possible. So, all right. I think the next slide then.
Let's see. Oh, having a little trouble advancing it. One moment.
Okay, no problem. We can keep talking. Oh, all right. So no problem, but there is a problem. The problem that we want to share with you is textile pollution, and that's why you're here tonight, to learn a little bit more about this. It really is an issue of environmental injustice. People don't realize that, and it didn't come about from a place of cruelty or malevolence or anything like that, but it's ended up being not just an environmental justice issue, but an environmental racism issue, because it does truly disproportionately affect countries in the global south. And these are countries that are far less empowered than the global north. And as you'll also hear tonight in our conversation, it's not just the global south. This issue of textile pollution and textile waste, more often than not, negatively impacts communities that are economically challenged and more marginalized right here in the US too. So when it's not going abroad to harm less resource areas of the world, it's actually ending up and staying right here in the US much of the time, and also being a negative impact in the lives and in the health and well-being of people who have less here in the US. So despite the scale of the problem, and people are like, well, I give all my clothes to Goodwill, like, how is that a problem? The truth is that every single year, about 34 billion pounds, in excess of 34 billion pounds of textiles are generated and discarded here in the US. So awareness of this around a public health issue is very low, despite the size of the problem. And if you look at my little textile waste management timeline there, it has just become bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can see with the colors that a lot of it, most of it, is just landfilled. A good portion of it is burned, and some of the energy can be recovered from that incineration. Very, very small percentage is composted, and a very, very small percentage actually gets recycled. So 34 billion pounds of textile waste a year is a lot of textile waste. How the heck do we end up with so many discarded textiles? The next slide. Well, part of the problem and part of the reason we ended up with so many discarded textiles is this whole issue around fashion and fast fashion, really more specifically. I have heard some of the producers, the big box stores, the H&Ms, the Zaras, some of the other big, retailers say there are 52 different seasons of fashion now. So you don't have to wait for the fall collection. You don't have to wait for the spring collection. You can get new clothes every week, 52 seasons. That's really scary that like anybody would think they need to consume that many different pieces of clothing. And because they're so readily available, so cheaply sold, people are like consuming more and more of them. So that really contributes to the problem. This is a super report. It's probably not bedtime reading, but the Climate Change 2021 report really is fantastic in that it lays out a lot of the scenarios around climate change. And of all the different various widely used scenarios, each one using different like variables and making different calculations and different assumptions around greenhouse gas, land use, such all kinds of different pieces that go into the catalyst for climate change. This particular report focuses on the 5 most likely scenarios that will occur. And what it finds is that there's over 50% chance that we're going to exceed the 1.5 degree target. We're either going to exceed it or reach it between 2021 and 2040. Well, guess what? We're already past 2021, right? So the most common estimate from the 5 premier scenarios are that in the early 2030s, we're going to exceed that boundary, that degree calculation that we shouldn't exceed if we don't want to cause all kinds of massive damage to ourselves as a species and of course to our planet. So next slide. Now, why does it matter that it gets warmer, right? Like, I love the climate in Virginia. Sometimes I wonder why I live in New England. And I keep thinking, well, wow, it's unseasonably warm. I think it's going to be in the 70s, the high 70s next week, I heard. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty hot for April. The climate risk that's associated with this degree temperature increase that we are experiencing, the science is there, leads to a lot of different risks in many, many parts of the world. And the reason that I bring this all up is because textile waste pollution is just one piece of this, but we can certainly make a difference there. But it is part of a much bigger and broader scenario that I think we're all starting to pay attention to. There are different parts of the world that already are water stressed, which will, when we cross over the degree threshold, will become much more water stress, much more heat stress. Parts of the world that literally will be at high risk all the time for wildfires, hurricanes. When a 1 in 10 year event starts happening more than 1 in 10 years, when it's happening every 1 in 3 years or every year, it's no longer a 1 in 10 year event. And so what we've seen in the last 20 years is that those like 1 in 10 year events are not happening 1 in 10 anymore. They're happening 1 in 5 and 1 in 3. So I guess we need to rename them. And then the other risk is basically flooding. As the ice melts, we have parts of the world that are at high risk for being underwater, and So that's going to create a lot of discord. It already is in many parts of the world with migrations and different kinds of conflicts over like resources. So this is something, it's not just about, you know, preventing somebody from buying cool new clothes. It's really doing the next right thing in our part in helping all of us and future generations as well. All right, so enough about the big picture. Here it is. And I wish Mark was here tonight to share with you sort of how this all came to be. And I know some of the team has been part of this earlier in sort of the conceptual phase. I wish Evan were here. If you look at this piece of sculpture, it debuted at Boston College in the McMullen Museum in January of 2021. It was in the McMullen. And then last spring, it traveled to the Smithsonian. It was invited last spring to have spent 3 days at the Smithsonian Innovation Festival. About 11,000 people a day got to see it there. And a lot of them were kids. They were, you know, K through 12 kids that were coming through on tours to be part of the Innovation Festival. So a lot of conversation, a lot of, I think a lot of education and growth opportunity came out of that. It was then invited to go to the Boston University Medical School campus, where public health researchers and medical school students got to engage with it. Our colleague, D.L. Lundberg, is a public health expert. So this was really particularly important. And when we talk a little bit more about some of the effects of fast fashion and textile waste, you'll see how public health is massively impacted by textile dumping. After it was at the medical school campus, it got to go to the Charles River campus at BU. So it traveled from, you know, one whole area, downtown Boston, over to, you know, the Charles River campus sort of along the Esplanade. And it was at an art center there for a while. And it's been invited to go to a school in Delaware shortly. And it has also been invited to go out to the art center at the University of Washington, where it will probably go end of this summer, next fall. So it's been on the move. There are some plans for it to go to the Mass College of Art and Design. And wherever it goes, there's a conversation, and that's what we really like. We want there to be a conversation about it. I think I'm going to invite my colleagues. I'm going to invite Griffin and maybe Kate to talk a little bit more about the educational piece and the policy piece that we're working on, because I think those are also like, you know, we don't just want people to look at the art and say, ooh, you know, this is funky, like what's going on here. The clothes that are in the sculpture were collected from Boston College students who were just ready to get rid of them over 3 days before Thanksgiving, the year before the sculpture was you know, installed for the first time. That's 3 days worth of people saying, I don't want this anymore. The other thing to tell you is that there are many pieces in this sculpture with the price tag still on them. Many pieces. In fact, people at the Smithsonian were coming up and saying, hey, can I take this? Can I take that? I'm like, no, it's kind of part of the installation for now. Let's hold off. And that's just 3 days. And it's not like, you know, it wouldn't be any different on most campuses, to be honest. So that's something to think about too. So at this point, I'm gonna let some of the other experts here, the educational and the policy expert, weigh in a little bit about some of their work this fall and spring. Kate?
Yeah, Griffin can talk a bit about the website because he did work on that, but one of the other educational components of the project is Addie and I worked on putting together a policy database related to kind of all these different policies that can be used to limit the amount of textile waste going to the global south or hold companies responsible and making sure that they're producing sustainably, or they're taking responsibility for clothes after they've been lived in and when people are ready to throw away. So that database we looked at like global, national, state, municipal, and thrift store specific policies. Kind of just, it's really interesting to see kind of what's still in the process and what still has to be argued about and fought for, and what is already happening. So we'll be going through some specific policies later in the presentation. That's kind of an overview of one educational component of it.
Griffin, do you want to talk any more about the modules?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna drop the website in the chat if anyone wants to go visit it. But we worked on these modules with, I guess, kind of a maybe middle high school level in mind, and it's just a quick little course. And as you'll see, if you go to the website, there's a couple goals. So one is understanding the big picture that we kind of just went through with Dean DeVoy, how you connect to that big picture. So your consumption as a in this textile fashion industry, and then making a personal action plan, which I think is a really cool part of this, to maybe curb your habits or think about how they can change and how you can act and address this global issue. And then introducing new ways to do that and being an advocate. And so we connect to a lot of different resources there. So this is a really great way to introduce yourself to some new ideas that you may not be familiar with.
All right, thank you. I think we'll go on to the next slide. We'll give you another picture of Aftermath. Aaron. Yeah, all right, so there it is. And the reason that I have these two in here is the first installation, like I said, was at Boston College in the McMullen. And this, I don't know, I think this is in the Art Center at BU. You'll see that it's different, right? Every time Aftermath gets installed somewhere, it's different. It's a slightly different piece of art. It's a slightly different piece of art advocacy. So after it went to this, when it went to the Smithsonian, it had a documentary that was sort of running in the background there, and that was sort of a tech piece that we embedded in it. This past fall, when it went to Boston University, it had these protest signs that were also part of it embedded in it. And each protest sign has a QR code that goes to some information, some further educational module, or connects you to other policies on like upcycling or something that is a point of interest and a point of development. We also embedded iPads into it this fall so that you could engage in sort of live time with some of the data and some of the learning. The plans for it post it's next, so not when it goes to Delaware, but I think when it goes out to the University of Washington, would be for it to also have maybe some virtual reality stuff where you're looking into it, and we have some people working on that from our provost office. You're looking into it, you see the t-shirt that you're wearing, and then you get to go on this sort of journey with the t-shirt you're wearing and the lifespan of it. If we flip back to the other slide for 1 second, I just want to put backwards.
Yes,
okay.
sorry, give me a second. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Just some technical difficulties here. One
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, we want to go back to the installation at the McMullen for a minute if we could. I just want to point out the landfill simulator reactor. Okay, there we are. If you'll notice as you look at it, if you look to the left, I think it's the left on your screen, this kind of funky looking plexiglass device in the left. Evan built that. It is a landfill reactor simulator. And that is a non-functioning one that is part of the art and part of the sculpture. But there are other ones that Evan has built and that he has running, where one has like a t-shirt, one has like a pair of denim, one has like polyester in it, and there's water that's pumped through it, and so he's able to measure like what happens, what the water leach, what's the damage to the water. He's able to measure what is the emission coming off of this as it's decomposing. I think he literally has them like running in his dorm. Does anyone on the team know? He wanted to put them in my garage, and I thought that that's where they were going to live. I think they're in his dorm room, so that's a whole other thing. But they're hooked up to all kinds of sensors, and he gets like live data from them all the time, which is, and you can really see like this is what's happening to this t-shirt as it's sitting wherever it's sitting in an open air dump. So we'll go ahead again. Yeah, and so this is just a QR code, after the talk, and if you have other questions or anything like that, you'll be able to just go to this and get some more information. I know Griffin put the website in the chat too. So we'll just go to the next piece.
And I should say, there was a comment that the chat was disabled. It should now be open to anyone. So if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, I have re-entered the website that Griffin had typed in initially as well.
Great, thank you. So, the big issue is like, okay, so big deal. I buy these clothes and I like them and I like to wear them and they're part of my identity, and then I give them away. And people are like, well, what's wrong with that? Well, it's not wrong to want to, clothes are part of who we are. They're costumes of our culture and our identity. But it's that we don't know what really happens to them. And here's part of the talk tonight is what really happens, the secret life of what happens to your donated clothing. Of that 34 billion pounds of textile waste every single year, about close to 70%, so 66% of it is landfilled in the US. It just goes to landfills here in the US. Now, as I said at the beginning, most of those landfills are located in communities that are more disempowered. So right there's sort of a justice issue. The other thing to know is that the people who are actually producing the most textile waste are wealthier communities and wealthier parts. So they're producing the problem and then loading it off to less resourced and less economically empowered areas and more marginalized groups. About 15% of it is burned. It is burned. Some of that has energy recovery associated with it. The real truth that I don't think most people realize is that of those, all that extra textiles that are generated and then not sitting in closets, we're not even talking about the stuff in the closets, only about 15% of it actually gets recycled at all, even attempted to be recycled. And among the recycled part, about 50% of the part that's, in air quotes, recycled, about 50% of that is sent to other countries. There's this whole idea that like, oh, someone less fortunate is going to get to wear my old, I don't know, Tommy Bahama shirt or whatever. I like Tommy Bahama. I'm not picking on Tommy Bahama. I'm just saying that there's this idea that like somehow our old clothes that it's like appropriate to be like sending them to other parts of the world. One, there's like some cultural like effects of that. Like, why would we think that people in other parts of the world want to wear our old clothes? And two, it also puts people out of work in those parts of the world. Textile manufacturers are put out of work by all of this being dumped in their countries. Tailors and seamstresses and a lot of people who their livelihood is connected with clothing and fashion and textiles in their own countries are at risk because of this. The other thing is that even when it's not just like economically hurting people in other parts of the world, most of what goes there ends up in landfills there. So instead of landfills here in the US, it actually winds up in landfills in other parts of the world. Now, somebody would say, well, so what? A landfill here, a landfill there, what difference does it make? Well, the difference actually, and again, I wish Evan was here and maybe Cecilia can talk about this or Lourdes. The difference is that those landfill waste systems in other parts of the world are very frequently less advanced in terms of their landfill like engineering, gas emission control and capture technology, protecting water supplies around them. They're just less advanced landfills. And so the damage, the environmental, the air, the water, the soil damage that occurs in open air dumps with less advanced technology is much greater. Let's see. At this point, the United States, the United Kingdom, and actually South Korea are exporting the most, discarded textiles to the global South. And I'm not picking on any of those countries. It's just data. We are sending the most to parts of the world that can frequently really not say no a lot of the times. There's a little clip later, and whether we watch it tonight while we're talking, or you can look at it later, of a colleague of ours who is in Accra, Ghana, who's really talking about, this is what's happening. And a lot of times countries in Africa and Southeast Asia will say like, well, we don't really want this stuff coming, and they'd like to try to ban it from coming, but there are all these other like political and economic machinations that get in the way of them being able to like say, no, we don't want all this discarded stuff being shipped to us. Okay, so next slide, I think. All right, so this is 2019 data. So at this point, it's already like, 5 years old. We do have some new research and the team's been working on it. We have a new paper that will be published soon. We have another one that's in process right now that's in its like writing generative phase. But at this point, it was about 5 pounds of like textile waste per person, 7 pairs of jeans per person, and 14 t-shirts a year per person. So, I mean, that's a lot of stuff that we're just sort of offloading, so to speak. I think next one. All right, so where are we sending it? Lourdes, do you want to talk about where it's going? Cecilia?
Hi, you caught me off guard.
That's okay. I'm just inviting the whole crew in.
Yeah, so a lot of our exports, as we could see on the chart, are going to Central America and Southern Asia. And a lot of our exports go into, I believe, we've already mentioned it before, a lot of them kind of go into these like under-resourced communities, we could say. And as we could even just see here on the chart, right? I mean, Central America, Southern Asia. And I think moving beyond the chart, I just want to draw in the implications of exported clothes ending up in these areas, which is like there's a lot of economic and financial drawbacks for these communities, which have to really put in a lot of economic resources in order to clean up the mess that we kind of dump in their communities. You know, it affects their livelihood, it affects their water, it affects, you know, the way the kids could go out and play. Some other countries are like South America, the Caribbean, and we could see that on the chart. And we could see the you know, as we look at these countries, it's quite obvious the kind of demographic that ends up dealing with our waste. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the three big sort of points I'd like to make about that are, one, that the textiles actually pollute the air, the water, the land where they land, where they're sort of dumped, right? Whether they're dumped here, we do have some landfill capture technology that's pretty efficient because it's a you know, it's just a more developed area. But when they land abroad, the damage to water, land, air is pretty significant. And what that ends up doing is it causes a lot of environmental problem. It also causes public health problem. The damage to the air is linked with respiratory and cardiovascular health issues for people that are living in those areas. The damage to the environment doesn't just impact people and, you know, maybe like quality of soil for food and things like that, but it also impacts non-human species where it is it's polluting their ecosystem as well. The textile, this offloading of textiles abroad impacts local economies in other parts of the world. It certainly interferes with employment and entrepreneurial enterprises in other parts of the world. I know that Matilda is a fashion designer and an activist and runs, you know, runs a tailoring and all kinds of like, she's a wonderful business woman, but it has been hard for her in Ghana where an enormous amount of discarded textiles have landed. And then finally, you know, I said before, like the idea that we genuinely believe that like people in other parts of the world want to wear our old clothes is kind of interesting. Like it should be, you know, wearing secondhand, upcycled, thrifted clothes should be a choice. It shouldn't be something that's forced upon you. So that's you know, that's one of the things that I'd like to say. People are donating clothes here in this part of the world and in the UK and South Korea, not because they don't, you know, they want to do something harmful. They just don't know what happens, and most of the people don't know what happens. The amount of clothes that are donated is way greater than the amount of clothes that can be used and bought in thrift stores. So thrift stores don't know what to do with all of the excess a lot of the time. Which is where you get that like shipping abroad phenomena. It's just that there's sort of more being produced, right? And so the more that's being produced in fast fashion, the more that people are again discarding from a place of like, you know, generosity and saying, hey, someone else can use this, but it's just too much overall that that's being consumed and then discarded. All right, let's go to the next slide then. Yeah, and again, these are like, you know, I showed you, Lourdes talked about the destinations where US clothes that are discarded are being sent, the primary destinations. And this one really looks at where the primary destinations where discarded clothes are going from Europe. Now you'll notice that or you'll recall that the US was sending most of our discarded clothing down to South America. You saw that, Central and South America, which, I mean, in terms of just like straight down makes sense. We just sort of ship it down. Whereas Europe sends most to the African continent, which again, it's sort of like, we're literally like pushing it down. Okay, next slide, I think. Yeah. All right, some of the stuff that I said, most landfills in the US actually have some technology. And, you know, again, that's where Evan's research comes in and like actually measuring what's happening with the sensors. But landfills and open air dumps in other parts of the world don't have that feature. They don't have that. So again, the negative effect is compounded. Next slide. Okay, how does it affect health? Well, the rain comes down. You know, there are lots of dyes in clothes. Who that is, you know, over 40, I guess, or probably maybe 30, I don't know, doesn't remember the acid wash jeans phase. I mean, those jeans had like weird dyes and weird chemicals and all kinds of stuff. And denim itself is a particularly difficult textile for the environment. It's pretty harsh on the environment. In the pre-consumer phase and the post-consumer phase, denim takes a lot of you know, the material that goes into it, the dyeing, the water that like is like used to grow it, the water that's used to like produce like, you know, the jeans. It's very water intensive, and it also is very hard to break down. It's very hard to break down, and it takes a really long time for it to like decompose into anything that isn't sort of seeping out dyes and other pollutants. So we have years ago we started kind of a whole denim a denim awareness thing that, you know, you really don't need like 10 pairs of jeans. It does, I mean, it affects the groundwater, pollutes the groundwater, pollutes water that animals drink, pollutes water that people drink, pollutes the ground that different foods and you know, other parts of the environment are growing in. It also produces gas. It produces methane gas. We know that methane gas, you know, we hear a lot about that with like cows and burgers and that whole bit. But so textiles also contribute to that problem. And the greenhouse gas is incredibly powerful that's produced and damaging to, like I said, air quality, and it affects respiratory and cardiovascular. There's some new research that came out, I think like last week, that said that air pollution also negatively impacts, it's been linked to dementia. So, I mean, again, like I'm not trying to scare anybody, but there's a lot of stuff we can do to prevent, one, the climate and the world from getting hotter and hotter, and two, from like all of this stuff hurting us. Like we didn't know what we didn't know, and now we know. And I hope people walk away tonight or walk into the other room of their house off of Zoom
Julia, I think your video is frozen.
While Dean DeVoy's frozen, I've been looking at some of the questions and in the chat, and there are so many great questions. I wish I had the answers to all of them, but I just wanted to say that Lourdes and I have been looking at some of these policies, and one really interesting thing is that a few years ago, around 2016, the East African Commission, I think it's Commission EAC, which is a group of 5 or so countries in East Africa, got together to initiate these bans on secondhand clothing being imported into their countries. Maybe not total bans, but at least reducing it or adding a tariff. And so later on, as they were getting ready to implement this policy, the US threatened to take away AGOA, which I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's basically this agreement between the US and these East African countries to help with like economic development. And so I think it was around 2018, these threats to take away this program started. These countries started backing away from implementing the policies, not surprisingly. And only one, I believe it was Rwanda, has actually stuck with the policy and kept it all those years. So.
If we go forward a slide, I can start talking about the solutions and some more of the policies that Griffin had just started talking about. Yeah, so the next couple slides are about like personal ways that you can start to reduce your own textile waste pollution and you know, shop more sustainably. So some stuff we have here that we also talk about on the website, and the website has a whole kind of form where you can make your own plan in terms of how you want to take action to go through your closet or to buy less. So we have thrifting, swapping clothes with your friends and family, and then learning how to upcycle your clothes. At BC, at least, we have a new upcycling club, which is really exciting. So we get to use the maker space on campus and encourage students to, you know, make clothes that they maybe don't want to wear anymore, make them something that they do want to wear. And then on the next slide, if you go forward, you know, you do end up having clothes that you're just not going to use. So some steps that we have here is that you can ask your friends, family, and community if anyone else wants to take it off your hands. I grew up with 2 younger sisters and 3 cousins, and we would all share clothes. So I never thought of that as like a sustainable way of shopping or getting clothes when I was younger. But looking back on it now, it's a good way to kind of share these clothes and not throw them away. There's also apps and plenty of ways you can do it online with sites like eBay, Poshmark, and Depop. And then if that doesn't work, then there's also ways of downcycling, which we talk more about in the next slide. And that's kind of when you're turning your old clothes, which I'm sure you've done before, turning old sheets into rags. Or there's also companies that will take your old clothes and turn them into stuffing that can be used to stuff like comforters or pillows, or just like cutting the clothing up small to be used as stuffing. So on the next slide, we kind of just define downcycling there. So instead of, you know, making it something more wearable, it's kind of breaking it down into smaller parts so that it can be used again for a whole new purpose. And then on the next slide, we have 2 examples of companies that do this type of downcycling that I was talking about. So Blue Jeans Go Green there in 4 days are 2 examples if you wanted to look into them, see if that's something you'd want to do. And then if we go a couple slides forward, I can start talking about what policies could reduce textile waste, if you see that slide coming up.
Sorry.
Dean DeVoy is out of power. Her whole house lost power, she said. So we'll try our best to take over.
Oh no.
Hopefully she can get back, but we'll see what we can manage.
Okay.
Doing great, Kate.
Okay. Thanks.
Let me see if I can get to the next slide for you guys. One moment.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, if we want to go to the what policies could reduce textile waste one, that'd be great. Okay, yeah, perfect.
Sorry.
You're good. Yeah. Great. So now I can just go through some policy solutions to address this problem. So this is what I was talking about earlier, that the project, the database that Addie and I were working on. And so this is one of the bans that Griffin was also talking about. So these have been proposed in Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Burundi. But as Griffin was talking about, that for these countries, it's risky for them to kind of sacrifice their relation with the United States to implement these bans. So that's one reason that they haven't stuck in these countries, unfortunately. And so that's one solution. And then on the next slide, we have images from the panel that Dean DeVoy was talking about. And so that's a local activist who's in Ghana who owns her own textile company. And so she talked about the experience of local sellers there. And then, yeah, on that side, another policy that we have is tax incentives for recycling. So that's tax incentives for like domestic recyclers, and then also for companies. So companies could get incentives in order to account for the cost that it will take to properly dispose of the clothes after they're used. So that's kind of fits under the category of extender producer responsibility for these companies, where it's holding them responsible for how the clothes are going to be disposed of afterwards. Yeah, so that's one kind of economic way that it can be addressed. And then on the next slide that you had up there, it's national targets for reuse. Just making countries like set goals for how much material is going to be reused. And then policy number 4 on the next slide is banning the destruction of unsold clothes. So banning like the burning of clothes and limiting the amount that goes to landfills. So one specific example I can provide is that in Massachusetts, as some of you might know, as of November of 2022, you can no longer dispose of textiles in like your normal garbage disposal system. Like the trash truck that comes around, you can't put textiles in that anymore. So that's one way that a state policy has stopped them going to landfills where they could end up being incinerated. And then the next one that we have, policy number 5, is the extended producer policy that I was talking about earlier. And so that's just holding the companies responsible to make sure that they know where their clothes are going afterward, to make sure that they're being transparent in how the clothes are actually being produced, where they're being produced, if the workers in the factories that they're using are being paid fairly and treated fairly. These are all kind of ways that companies need to be held responsible, and we need to know kind of what's happening to they need to be aware of and responsible for what's happening to the clothes across their whole life cycle. And then on the next slide, I think we're coming to the end of the PowerPoint here. Did anyone else on the team have anything to add? Maybe Lourdes or Griffin about the policies? If not, I can close it out.
I think there was a really good question about like, why is it that, you know, some of the countries do not stop these textile importations? And I just wanted to reiterate that, you know, going back to the slides on policy number 1, a lot of the countries do want to stop the incoming textile waste. They want to put bans, but there's a lot of political and business considerations when these countries are, you know, thinking about bans. There's a lot of political moves in the relationship between these countries and the US. You know, so there's a lot of negotiation that goes on between, like, say, the exporters, which is usually the US and EU, and then those who are on the receiving end. So it's a very, you know, there's a lot of room for activism. There's also a lot of trickiness to how these are going to be implemented.
Even with that, just on that new policy here in Massachusetts, you know, there might be an information barrier. People just might not be aware. Although I do think I did get this in the mail recently and I saved it because of this group. But some people might also just not be motivated or forget. And there's also, you know, the farther it gets down the pipeline, you know, once it reaches the landfill, we can't really guarantee that there's going to be as much oversight. So really just, it's people, like I'm sure everyone here, taking the initiative to follow these policies and hopefully having some influence on those around us and hoping it spreads from there.
Yeah, and just going off of that, also some of the solutions that have been proposed, like companies that will pick up your used textiles if you're not throwing them away. Some of those companies are still partnering with textile brokers who will buy like leftover clothing from companies and then still ship it to the global south. So it's not a perfect solution. So one of like what we touched on before for like personal steps that you can take, it's still great to, you know, think about consuming less and keeping it in your circle and trading with people in your life. Yeah, that's also kind of at the core of the solutions here.
Yeah, I think one of the core messages of our project is that everyone can really contribute to the reduction of textile waste. Everyone, no matter who they are, because we're all consumers. So no matter what position we hold, no matter what our identity is, we can all really contribute to sustainability for the good of society.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back, Dean DeVoy.
Sorry about that, everyone. The power just completely went out. I was like, this is not happening. This is not happening. I know that the team has probably been doing a great job without me. Are there any questions? I'm not sure what the time frame is here. I want to be sensitive of everyone's time. I'm not sure if there are other questions that you'd like us to address.
Yes, let me stop the share here, and it does look as though we have several questions in the chat. One question is, you know, is there any way to kind of vet your kind of textile recyclers? Is there any data on like which companies you can kind of trust when you are at a point where you have goods that need to be recycled?
A company that you can, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, a company that you can trust that most of it is going to be sold here, or that it's going to be like upcycled here in some way.
Yes.
Or yeah, I mean, I think Kate, you're looking into some of that. Like Kate was just voted like most fashionable person in the Lynch School, and she's a big thrifter.
I am a big thrifter. I did not know that. That's news to me.
I just senior superlatives. Whoops.
Funny. Yeah, one of the projects that Addie and I were working on was actually compiling all the thrift stores in Boston. And then we called them up and tried to talk to a manager and ask them what happened to their unsold items, like what happened to the stock that they couldn't sell. And we weren't able to get answers from everyone, but we were able to get answers from some. And companies like Goodwill, they do have so much leftover stock that it ends up getting picked up by textile brokers. And from there, we don't exactly know what where the textiles are distributing it, or like what specific textile brokerage companies they're working with. But we do know that some brokers end up sending it to the global south. So that's one way you can kind of call up and see if you have a small local thrift shop. Then I'm sure they'll be able to tell you more and they'll know exactly where it's going. We found that some small stores in Boston were partnering with charities they would give it to the charities, and then the charities would bring it to like homeless shelters or make sure that it was distributed to people who could use it. And then I had one more point to make, but Helpsy is one of the disposal companies that I was kind of alluding to, and they actually list that 95% of the textiles they're taking are guaranteed to be reused or downcycled in some way. So 95%, that's a high percentage. So I'm sure you can also kind of look into more companies like that and call them up and kind of hold them accountable for how transparent they are about where the clothes are going.
I don't know if this came up, and I'll just say this because it's been an interesting thing that I've seen a lot of work being done in this space now, is like using discarded textiles for interior building blocks, for like shelving and like, movable like dividers and things like that in retail stores and in schools and stuff like that. So I think there are probably lots of ways to like use the textiles that are discarded where they wouldn't necessarily be worn by somebody else or end up in a landfill. I just think we haven't spent enough time ideating on that yet.
I was just going to add, I've noticed a lot of retailers recently starting their own secondhand shops within their sites. I know Levi has recently done that, and you can buy like secondhand denim jeans, jean jackets. I also work at a store that accepts old jeans and turns it into housing insulation. So
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of stores continue to do this, but those are always ones to look out for.
We have a question in the chat. What percentage of global textile waste is synthetic versus natural fibers? Do we have any data on that?
I don't actually have that data in front of me. Anecdotally, I know that an enormous amount of discarded textiles right now is actually cotton based, which, on one hand, that's good, right? It's like doesn't have as many of the synthetic fibers in it that it did, say, in the 70s when I was grooving in some polyester. However, on the other hand, as I said earlier too, cotton itself is a really, really hard stressor on the environment, growing cotton, producing cotton, the land, the water. And then, again, like it still takes forever to decompose, and there's still emission and there's still damage when it's, water is going through it. And it's probably not as bad in the post-consumer phase, but that doesn't mean that in the aggregate, it's not incredibly damaging to the environment in the pre-consumer and post-consumer phase. So I know I didn't really answer your percentage question, but yeah, I mean, it's probably better to buy cotton than something else, but it's still, it's the amount of these things that we're buying that's really the issue, I think, a larger issue.
Excellent. We also have a question. What can people who are passionate about this do to get more involved outside of academia?
Team, you want to take that? Did you guys talk about building an ethical closet, and what are some of your strategies?
We didn't talk about that, but I can talk about the LEAPS conference because we didn't talk yet about that. So the LEAPS conference is a new project that we're working on. And it's the virtual event happening on May 18th that I think we'll send the link in the chat. But that's open to anyone, any member of the public. It's tied to BC, but it's also about coming up with workshops, which includes like how to build an ethical closet, and just having conversations around like personal decisions you can make around sustainability. So part of the day is going to be researchers presenting their abstracts and the work that they've been doing in the space from an academic standpoint, but then later on we'll have those sandbox pitches and workshops where anyone is welcome to discuss. And then we'll also have a period where we're talking about those policies that we mentioned earlier, and kind of doing a hackathon where people will come together and think about how different policies can work together and how we can get things done. So we have registration and submissions. There's also submissions open for those workshops. If you have an idea of like something that you want to talk about that's not kind of research related, you can submit there. But yeah, that's one thing that we're doing that's open to everyone.
I think that's really great. And thank you to whoever submitted that question. On top of the LEAPS conference, besides, in addition to policy, there's a lot of little things that we can do in our daily lives. And we kind of talked about this previously, but little things such as kind of researching what textile waste is about, but more so like where our clothes are coming from, just so we know where they're going to end up. And of course, thinking about what do we do, after we use them, because I mean, most or all of us use clothes. And so just those little small actions really together will make a greater impact. Like what kind of company will you send your clothes to, and what are their policies? Because we might be sending our clothes to, say, like a certain thrift store, but it's not very in line with sustainability. So kind of knowing about what places to send our clothes to, and where they will end up. Just knowledge, I think, and education is a place to really start. And also kind of sharing this knowledge with our students and with people around us, and showing that kind of passion will be really contagious in promoting this activism.
And there's a really interesting comment in the chat that I think is a good point as well, that, sewing and repair is not widely taught anymore. And I do think that can, partly contribute to, if your shirt's missing a button, you may just pass it on instead of.
Yeah, we actually have a new maker space at Boston College, and I know that there's a build lab and a maker space at Boston University where I was really excited. One of my friends, Madison Dunaway, runs it. And I was really excited to go in and see like all of the like sewing machines and all of the like, mending things in there. Because the whole notion of mending is like taking on sort of a new exciting momentum now, I think. Like you don't really need to throw that away. Hey, you could like hem it or change it, or, like I also want to mention that there's a designer, I think at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and I know that there are others out there that use like textiles that have been discarded to make new funky fashion out of them. So, just because it's no longer, the season, fall season 2021, doesn't mean you can't take a piece of that and create something really cool for fall season 2024 or whatever. I mean, people can still be really fun and funky. I mean, like I said, Kate is a perfect example, and not have to keep going and consuming, rampant consumption. We know that it's not gonna get us where we want to go. It's not gonna get the planet where we need it to go, in its state of health, and it's not good for us.
And I was going to add in that some of the municipal policies that Adeline and I found is that there were some colleges that have mending initiatives, and also a couple of towns. I think one of them was in Canada, but I think there was one in the US too, that started mending initiatives where people, I think, were coming together at their like community center to mend. So that's something that you guys could take out and do in your own communities. Get people together who know how to sew, and teach people who don't.
Yeah, instead of a book club, mending club. Almost everything that I wear is upcycled and thrifted. And I did a spot for TV a couple of weeks ago, and I was wearing a turtleneck that was my mother's in the 70s. I was like, it went out of fashion for a while, and now it's back. So I'm glad I have it. So it's just fun.
Another question we have in the chat is, do we have any idea how costly it is for companies to use recycled materials to create new products versus brand new materials?
It's a good question. It's like the whole sort of that age-old question. I remember when I was renovating a house from the 1860s, and the builders and the architects were all like, why don't you just raise that thing and use all brand new? It'll be cheaper. It'll be so much cheaper. I don't have, again, like the financial numbers on this in front of me. I would think that it is, there is sort of an economic component that it's going to cost a little bit more to maybe use like upcycled materials. I also know, I am very involved in undergraduate business studies as well. And I also know that investors and other companies are much more likely now to fund and invest in companies that have higher ESG ratings. So that's the environmental, the social, and the governance scores that Morgan Stanley, they have like the Morgan Stanley index, just like a bond rating. This is an ESG rating. And so I think that, you could say, oh, it will cost more to use, upcycled materials in the short run, but I also think that there's a benefit to doing that for long game, that there's a people, planet, and profit. I'm not anti-capitalist at all. There's a people, planet, and a profit, a return value to doing that. So that would be my God bless America moment.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing this and sharing your knowledge with us tonight. I know we have some comments in the chat that Dean DeVoy, you should be very proud of your team. They did an excellent job stepping up and continuing the program when you lost power there. I will be sending some resources out to everyone who registered, and will we be able to share the slides as well?
Yeah, please. There, like I said, there's some QR codes in there. There's some links to some videos with our collaborator and our partner in Accra, Ghana, Matilda, who runs the Matilda. She runs the MFI Foundation, and she also runs the Make Fashion Clean social impact enterprise. So there's some good stuff going on there. So please do visit the links. Please come to LEAPS, leveraging environmental, art, and policy stakeholders. You get to see all this team again. You get to meet a lot of other new people, and please come and share your own ideas. Like I saw a lot in the chat about repair cafes and all kinds of like different things that I think, this is how we do it. This, we don't do it one person at a time. We do it collectively, and we do it in different ways, like creative writing and creative cafes and art and putting out publications for people that want to do that. Thrifting, just there's so many ways. So let's get together and let's talk about them.
And there is one question: is there a cost for the conference?
It's free.
Excellent.
Yes, thank you to our grateful sponsor, the Schiller Institute for Integrated Science and Society. My colleague, Laura Steinberg, who's been very supportive of this team's work for the past 2 years. And yes, because of the Schiller Institute, our conference is entirely free for anybody to attend. So please do join us.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Whew.